He had no idea of the current swirling beneath, the depths he had failed to plumb, the seeds I had planted long before his betrayal bloomed into this pathetic display. The stale air of the office, thick with the scent of old coffee and a faint metallic tang from the servers, felt like a pressure cooker about to explode around me. It was an office I had practically lived in for years, where the grime on the windowsills felt like a monument to countless missed weekends and forgotten holidays. Every dust mote dancing in the weak afternoon light seemed to be a silent witness to the slow, agonizing death of a dream. I sat across from Tristan, his grin wide and predatory, a mirror to the self-satisfied gleam in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, a ridiculously expensive ergonomic contraption I knew he'd charged to the company, his fingers steepled, the very picture of a man who believed he held all the cards, every ace dealt directly into his smug hand. "Well, Kaelan," he purred, his voice a low, mocking rumble that grated on my ears, a sound I had once mistakenly taken for confidence and charm. "It seems our little venture, our shared dream, as you so passionately called it, has finally come to an ignominious end. And it's all yours, my friend. Every last bite of debt, every disappointed investor, every broken promise." He chuckled then, a dry, humorless sound that scraped against my ears like fingernails on a chalkboard, a sound designed to chip away at my resolve, to make me flinch. "Don't look so surprised. You always were the visionary, the one with his head in the clouds, chasing impossible algorithms. I, on the other hand, am a pragmatist. And the pragmatist always knows when to cut his losses, preferably before they infect the whole operation." His words, meant to pierce and cripple, barely registered beyond a dull throb in my chest, a phantom ache from a wound already cauterized. My gaze drifted past him, through the smudged window, to the bustling city below, where life continued, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding in this dusty, soon-to-be-abandoned office. Taxis honked, pedestrians hurried, distant sirens wailed, a symphony of indifference. The hum of the servers, a constant companion for years, a lullaby of potential and progress, now seemed to mock me, a testament to what was being abandoned, to what he was abandoning. Tristan thought he had won. He believed I was broken, defeated, buried under the mountain of debt he had so meticulously ensured was solely my burden. He saw a man on the verge of ruin, a broken dream, a discarded tool left rusting in the rain. He saw only what was on the surface, what he wanted to see, what his limited understanding of true ambition allowed him to perceive. He had no idea of the current swirling beneath, the depths he had failed to plumb, the seeds I had planted long before his betrayal bloomed into this pathetic display. My hands, resting on the worn desktop, did not tremble. My breathing remained steady, a quiet rhythm against the chaos in the room. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched the corner of my lips, a secret held tight, a quiet assurance that transcended his petty victory. He watched me, searching for the crack, the despair, the fear that should have been there. But all he found was a quiet resolve, an unreadable calm that must have, for a fleeting moment, disarmed him, robbing him of the satisfaction he so desperately craved. "You think this is it, Tristan?" I finally said, my voice even, devoid of the emotion he craved, the despair he expected. "That this is the end of my story?" He merely scoffed, dismissing my words as the desperate ramblings of a man in denial, a last, pathetic gasp. He didn't know what I knew. He couldn't fathom the extent of my preparation, the sheer audacity of my design. The chessboard had been cleared, and he, in his arrogance, had only just begun to see the pieces I had kept hidden, the true game that had been playing out all along, right under his very nose. The journey to that stagnant office, to that moment of perceived defeat, was a long and arduous one, paved with countless sleepless nights and an unwavering, perhaps even naive, belief in a shared future. I was Kaelan, 32, a software developer whose ambition was as boundless as my fascination with the endless possibilities of code. My fingers danced across keyboards, lines of logic unfurling before me like intricate tapestries, each one a step closer to solving another complex puzzle. I had poured my very essence into our joint venture, a revolutionary AI platform that promised to redefine data analytics. It was my brainchild, a complex symphony of algorithms and machine learning that I had nurtured from its nascent stages, a concept born from years of research and a genuine desire to simplify the overwhelming complexity of big data. I remember sketching diagrams on napkins in late-night cafes, the thrill of a newly conceptualized data pathway electrifying my mind. Tristan, my business partner and, for a time, my closest confidant, had initially seemed like the perfect foil to my technical intensity. We'd met at a hackathon, strangely enough. I was buried in code, oblivious to the world, and he was effortlessly charming a panel of judges, spinning tales of innovation. His charisma was undeniable, his silver tongue capable of painting grand visions that captivated investors and clients alike. He was the face of the company, the one who navigated the notoriously opaque world of venture capital, who schmoozed at industry events while I meticulously built its intricate skeleton, its beating heart and soul, bite by bite, line by line. I thought we were a perfect yin and yang, the visionary and the enabler. He would bring in the resources and I would build the world. From the outset, I made sacrifices. My personal life took a back seat so far behind me I could barely see it in the rearview mirror. Weekends blurred into weekdays, and my small, perpetually messy apartment became little more than a satellite office, bathed in the sickly glow of multiple monitors. My refrigerator was a monument to takeout containers, and my social calendar was a barren wasteland. The financial strain was immense, a constant companion that whispered doubts into the quiet hours. I lived on ramen and cheap coffee, often dipping into the meager savings I had from my pre-startup days. Yet, I saw it all as an investment, a temporary hardship that would yield immense returns, a necessary crucible for forging something truly groundbreaking. Tristan, however, seemed to operate on a different wavelength altogether. While I meticulously tracked expenditures down to the last paperclip and reinvested every single profit back into development, he was more concerned with appearances. Lavish client dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, exorbitant high-end office rentals in prime downtown locations, and a disproportionate share of the initial seed money funneled into what he vaguely described as marketing initiatives became increasingly common. Exposure, Kaelan, it's about building the brand, he'd declare, waving away my concerns with a dismissive flick of his perfectly manicured hand. Red flags, small at first, began to wave with increasing urgency. Promises of transparency regarding accounts remained unfulfilled, always just around the corner, or in the process of being compiled by a new accounting firm. His explanations grew increasingly convoluted, veiled in jargon and evasiveness that even a systems architect like myself struggled to decipher. Synergistic market penetration strategies, he droned when I asked why a quarter of our seed round had vanished into a nebulous branding exercise. I often found myself covering shortfalls from my personal savings, rationalizing it as a temporary measure, a necessary evil to keep our dream alive. Each time, a knot of unease would tighten in my stomach, but I'd override it with the relentless optimism of a founder. My intuition, a quiet voice I had learned to trust through years of debugging complex systems, began to whisper warnings, soft at first, then growing louder. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a pattern of behavior that was becoming impossible to ignore, a series of anomalies that screamed system malfunction. His charming smile, once so reassuring, started to feel like a mask, his enthusiasm a well-rehearsed performance, a role he played to perfection, while the real show, the one where he siphoned off our resources, went on behind the scenes. One particularly grueling evening, after an investor meeting where Tristan had spun a dazzling, yet utterly vague, financial projection, I came back to the empty office. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. I pulled up our accounts, the ones I had limited access to, and cross-referenced them with the projected burn rate. The numbers simply didn't add up. There was a significant recurring discrepancy masked by layers of creative accounting. That was the evening the whisper became a shout. It hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just careless, he was actively skimming. The realization solidified in my mind, cold and hard. My dream wasn't just struggling, it was being actively undermined by its supposed co-creator. It was a betrayal so profound it hollowed me out. But in that hollowness, a new kind of resolve began to form, like steel hardening in a forge. The secret weapon, as I retrospectively label it, wasn't a sudden invention sparked by desperation. It was a strategic evolution born from that growing sense of unease and a developer's inherent need for redundancy and contingency. For months, perhaps even a year before Tristan's final, grand act of abandonment, I had been working on a parallel project. It started as a personal challenge, a what-if scenario that had gnawed at the back of my mind. What if our primary platform, for whatever reason, failed? What if we lost critical data? What if the unthinkable happened, a total collapse? This parallel project wasn't just a backup, it was a refinement, a leaner, more efficient version of our core technology, stripped of the bloat and unnecessary complexities that Tristan, in his pursuit of grandeur and superficial impressiveness, had insisted upon. He loved features that looked good on a slide deck but added little functional value. I, on the other hand, prioritized efficiency and raw power. I coded late into the night, often after Tristan had left the office, believing I was still slogging away on investor reports or trying to fix the latest bug in our perpetually under-resourced main platform. The silence of the office after he left was a welcome reprieve, a canvas for my true work. This secondary platform, which I codenamed Phoenix, was designed to be platform-agnostic, cloud-native, and infinitely scalable, far more so than our current, clunky prototype that was constantly breaking under the weight of its own bloat. More importantly, it had a unique, proprietary data compression and analysis algorithm, a concept I had been incubating since my university days, waiting for the right moment to fully develop it. It was my intellectual property, built entirely independent of our shared ventures resources, leveraging open-source tools and my own limited personal funds for server space, funds I had to be excruciatingly careful with, often sacrificing even more of my personal comfort. Phoenix was compact, agile, and devastatingly effective. It could process the same volumes of data as our primary system in a fraction of the time, with minimal computational overhead. Its development became my quiet obsession, a sanctuary from the increasingly toxic atmosphere Tristan was creating, a place where genuine innovation still thrived. I saw it not just as a safeguard, but as my true legacy, unblemished by external influences or questionable ethics. I also quietly began to diversify my network, reaching out to old university contacts, a few trusted mentors who had always seen my potential, and even some venture capitalists I had met at industry events. I framed these conversations as simply reconnecting, catching up over coffee, discussing general industry trends. I never mentioned our current failing venture, never hinted at my suspicions about Tristan. Instead, I carefully listened, gathering intelligence, understanding the shifting landscape of investment. I was building a subtle, almost invisible web of connections, laying the groundwork for a future I instinctively knew might not include Tristan. This wasn't about revenge then, it was about survival, about ensuring that my passion, my intellectual output, would not be extinguished by another's greed. I was preparing. Always preparing. The fear that had once threatened to paralyze me had morphed into a sharp, focused determination. As the financial noose tightened around the official company, a rope Tristan himself was meticulously braiding, his arrogance swelled, feeding on my apparent silence and increasingly withdrawn demeanor. He believed he had successfully cornered me, leaving me no escape, no options but to watch our company bleed out. Every morning he would breeze into the office, humming some insipid tune, a forced cheerfulness that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. He'd make snide remarks about my long hours, hinting that my efforts were ultimately futile given the company's inevitable trajectory. Burning the midnight oil again, Kaelan? Hope all that sweat equity pays off. Eventually, he'd mock, oblivious to the fact that my true vital work was happening in the subsequent hours, long after he had departed for his lavish dinners and social engagements. He saw my quiet intensity as a sign of desperation, my focus a symptom of a man drowning. He perceived my lack of public outrage as weakness, as if I had accepted my fate. This perception was precisely what I needed. It was the cloak beneath which I was orchestrating my masterstroke. He was so busy celebrating his perceived victory, he was blind to the true battle. While Tristan was actively siphoning off remaining funds, fabricating invoices for non-existent services, and orchestrating his vanishing act, a truly elaborate charade that involved shell corporations and offshore accounts, I was meticulously executing my plan. The first step was to secure all intellectual property related to Phoenix. I had already ensured its code base was entirely separate, registered under a personal LLC I had quietly established months prior, an entity completely disconnected from our joint venture. I'd spent weeks meticulously documenting every line of code, every design decision, every unique algorithm within Phoenix, creating a digital fortress around my creation, notarizing documents, filing patents that he would never even dream existed. Then I began to subtly transition my work. I started integrating small, innocuous components of Phoenix into the official platform, ostensibly as performance enhancements or bug fixes. It was a painstaking process requiring extreme precision and discretion. These integrations were Trojan horses designed not to improve the existing system, which I knew was doomed, but to gather specific data points, to subtly test compatibility, and to ensure that when the time came, Phoenix could seamlessly absorb and process the data from the dying primary system like a phantom limb rejoining its body. I worked through the nights, fueled by black coffee so strong it made my teeth ache and the quiet hum of my development rig. My apartment became my command center, a sanctuary where the real work unfolded, hours after Tristan had left the office, convinced I was still there, foolishly clinging to a sinking ship. I optimized Phoenix, stripped it down to its most efficient core, anticipating the absolute necessity of operating with minimal resources once Tristan had pulled the rug out from under me. Every line of code was a defiant stand, every successful test a small victory in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. I also began to systematically back up all critical client data, not just the financial records Tristan was so eagerly manipulating, but the actual raw data our clients had entrusted us with, the very heart of their operations. This was a precarious dance requiring stealth and precision like disarming a bomb blindfolded. I developed a secure, encrypted tunnel to my personal cloud servers, transferring terabytes of information under the guise of routine maintenance and off-site backup, tasks I had always championed. Tristan, preoccupied with his exit strategy, with counting his ill-gotten gains and planning his lavish escape to some tax haven, barely noticed. Or if he did, he dismissed it as my usual paranoia about data integrity, a quirk he'd always found amusingly quaint. His focus was entirely on liquidating assets, emptying bank accounts, and preparing his elaborate escape. He was too busy counting his stolen millions to notice the quiet dismantling of his perceived victory, the meticulous rerouting of the very resources he thought he'd destroyed. My conversations with prospective investors, the ones I had reconnected with, shifted imperceptibly. What started as casual networking evolved into discreet, high-level discussions about early-stage, disruptive AI technologies. I never mentioned our current failing venture, nor Tristan. Instead, I spoke in carefully chosen hypotheticals, painting a compelling picture of a future where data analysis was instantaneous, intuitive, and infinitely scalable, alluding to a proprietary approach that was far beyond anything currently on the market. I presented carefully curated, anonymized performance metrics from Phoenix, letting the numbers speak for themselves, letting their undeniable power do the heavy lifting. The curiosity gap I had carefully cultivated began to widen into an insatiable hunger. They saw potential, a glimmer of something truly groundbreaking, without fully understanding its genesis, its defiant birth from the ashes of betrayal. Tristan, meanwhile, was actively sabotaging our shared company's reputation with a gleeful abandon. He would miss crucial investor calls without explanation, provide misleading financial statements filled with blatant fabrications, and generally alienate anyone who might still show interest in our struggling venture. He was effectively burning the bridges, ensuring there would be no safety net for me once he vanished, sealing my supposed fate. He believed he was burying me. He didn't realize he was merely clearing the ground for Phoenix to rise, stronger and more resilient than anything he could ever crush. The quieter I became, the more focused on my clandestine work, the bolder Tristan grew in his destructive path. He was convinced I was broken, that I was just a matter of time before I crumbled. But beneath that calm exterior lay a storm of calculated precision, a plan that was now fully armed and ready to deploy. The air in the grand ballroom of the Innovation Summit was electric, thick with the scent of ambition, freshly brewed coffee, and the faint, sweet perfume of anticipation. Investors, tech magnates, and industry titans milled about, their hushed conversations punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of knowing laughter. Tristan was there, of course, holding court near the opulent marble bar, a magnum of champagne in his hand, radiating false bonhomie. He had arrived in a tailored suit, a pristine white shirt, and a silk tie, looking every inch the successful entrepreneur. A stark contrast to my own understated presence in a simple, dark suit I'd worn to every major event for years. He had even, rather brazenly, attempted to introduce himself to some of my carefully cultivated contacts, spinning a tale of how he had salvaged a recent unfortunate business venture, subtly implying I was the one who had run it into the ground with my unrealistic expectations. He looked over at me, caught my eye, and offered a condescending smirk, a dismissive flick of his hand, believing he had already won the narrative, that his version of events was the only one that mattered. I approached the main stage, my heart a steady drum against my ribs, the hum of anticipation growing in the room. My slot was early, strategically placed to capture maximum attention before the bigger names, the industry giants, took over. I took a deep breath, the accumulated pressure of months of clandestine work coalescing into this single, defining moment. The stage lights were warm on my face, the microphone cool beneath my fingertips. My presentation, titled The Quantum Leap in Data Synthesis, Unveiling Phoenix, began with a simple, yet profound question displayed on the massive screen behind me. What if impossible was just a matter of perspective? I moved fluidly through the initial slides, outlining the systemic inefficiencies in current data analytics, referencing the very problems our old, failing company had ostensibly tried to solve, the exact challenges Tristan had claimed to be addressing. There was no anger in my voice, no hint of bitterness, just a calm, analytical dissection of the status quo, a precise dismantling of the very problems I knew everyone in the room faced daily. Then came the pivot, the moment I had meticulously choreographed for months. For months, I stated, my voice clear and steady, resonating with an inner certainty, I have been working on a solution that redefines these limitations. Not merely an improvement, but a complete paradigm shift, a true leap forward in how we interact with and understand data. I unveiled the core technology of Phoenix, explaining its unique algorithms, its unparalleled processing speed, and its revolutionary data compression capabilities. I presented real-time demonstrations showing Phoenix crunching terabytes of complex information, data sets that were eerily similar to those from our old venture, but processed with impossible speed, in seconds, generating insights that would take traditional systems hours or even days. The room, initially murmuring with polite interest and the clinking of ice and glasses, gradually fell silent, replaced by a palpable sense of awe. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as the profound implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in. Jaws dropped, eyes widened, and the air crackled with a new kind of energy. Tristan, who had been chatting animatedly, laughing perhaps a little too loudly with a group of unsuspecting investors, suddenly froze. His laughter died in his throat. His eyes, which had been dismissively glancing at the stage, now widened in disbelief, then in dawning recognition. He saw the company logo I had subtly placed on one of the demo screens, the stylized phoenix rising from ashes, a symbol he now understood with a chilling clarity. He saw the familiar datasets, the ones he had thought were locked away in our defunct servers, inaccessible and worthless, now being processed with lightning speed, performing feats he had once claimed were impossible. His jaw slackened and his charismatic veneer crumbled, replaced by naked shock and a dawning horror that twisted his features into an ugly mask. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly pale green. But the true power of Phoenix, I continued, my voice rising slightly, captivating every gaze in the room, holding them rapt, lies not just in its speed, but in its integrity. Unlike systems cobbled together from borrowed parts and compromised foundations, systems that fail under pressure, Phoenix was built from the ground up with a singular vision, uncompromised data truth. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting their full weight settle over the stunned audience. It was developed entirely independently, funded by my own resources, every line of code meticulously crafted and legally protected under my sole intellectual property. It is, in essence, the pure, unadulterated vision that was, regrettably, stifled by previous entanglements. The word entanglements hung in the air, a thinly veiled accusation understood perfectly by everyone in the room. I then displayed a final slide, a minimalist yet impactful graphic. It showed two converging lines, one, plummeting downwards, labeled conventional AI, and the other, soaring upwards, labeled Phoenix AI. Beneath it, a single line of text appeared, bold and undeniable: the future belongs to the uncompromised. The collective gasp from the audience was almost audible, a wave of realization sweeping through the ballroom. Investors who had heard Tristan's carefully crafted lies, his excuses for the failed venture, now looked at him with dawning suspicion, their eyes flicking between his pale, contorted face near the bar and my composed demeanor on stage. Tristan, sensing the shift, the complete unraveling of his deceit, the sudden, seismic collapse of his meticulously constructed world, looked like a man who had walked into a ghost from his past, a haunting echo of his own treachery. He stammered, tried to speak, but no words came out, only a gurgle of disbelief. His carefully constructed empire, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, was not just crumbling, it was vaporizing before his very eyes. The silence in the room, thick with accusation, was deafening, save for the quiet hum of the Phoenix demo running flawlessly on the screen, a relentless, irrefutable testament to its power and my secret triumph. The immediate fallout was swift and decisive. As the applause thundered through the ballroom, a deafening cacophony that must have sounded like a death knell to Tristan, he tried to melt into the crowd, muttering incoherent excuses. Misunderstanding, market downturn, unforeseen circumstances. But it was too late. His carefully cultivated facade had shattered, revealing the hollow core beneath. Several of the venture capitalists and angel investors, faces grim with a combination of anger and profound regret, immediately converged on him. I saw one, a rather intimidating figure with a reputation for merciless business dealings, corner him near the exit, his finger jabbing accusingly. Their exchange was heated, though I couldn't hear the exact words over the celebratory clamor around me. I could only imagine the accusations being hurled, the demands for accountability for the substantial funds Tristan had squandered or, worse, embezzled from our previous partnership. He looked like a cornered animal, his usual charismatic smirk replaced by a desperate, panicked grimace. Word, as it always does in these tight-knit circles, spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the story of Tristan's abandonment and my subsequent, spectacular reveal had traversed the entire summit. The initial shock turned into a wave of indignation directed squarely at him. His carefully cultivated network of contacts evaporated before his eyes. People who had once lauded him, who had sought his advice, now openly shunned him, turning their backs, their expressions a mixture of profound disappointment and outright disgust. I later heard that he was served with multiple lawsuits stemming from investors in our previous venture, not just for the money he had stolen, but for a whole host of fraudulent activities that came to light in the wake of Phoenix's unveiling. His lavish lifestyle, designed to project an image of effortless success, became his undoing, as it provided ample evidence of his financial misappropriations when the legal teams started digging. The yacht, the luxury cars, the penthouse apartment all became exhibits in the case against him. He vanished from the public eye shortly thereafter, his reputation in tatters, leaving behind a trail of legal woes and broken trust. His downfall was complete, a direct consequence of his own deceit and his fundamental underestimation of me. For others, the reaction was more nuanced. Some of my old colleagues from the previous company, the engineers and junior developers who had quietly supported me or expressed concern about Tristan's increasingly erratic and self-serving behavior, approached me with genuine relief and admiration. Their eyes held a quiet understanding, a shared sense of vindication. There were a few, however, who had sided with Tristan, perhaps out of perceived loyalty or a desire to stay on the winning team, those who had turned a blind eye to his obvious misdeeds. Their faces were a mix of shock and profound regret, a sudden realization of the true cost of their complicity. They offered apologies, tentative overtures for reconciliation, but the trust, once broken, was not easily mended. I accepted their apologies with a calm nod, understanding that actions, not words, were the true measure of character. My focus remained firmly on the future, on Phoenix, on the path ahead. In the weeks and months that followed, Phoenix soared. The investment offers poured in, not just from the attendees of the summit, but from major tech firms and global enterprises who had caught wind of the breakthrough. I meticulously evaluated each one, choosing partners who aligned with my vision of integrity and innovation rather than those driven purely by short-term profit. I built a new team, a collective of brilliant minds who shared my passion for ethical AI and technological advancement, a group unified by purpose and a rejection of the cynicism that had once surrounded me. We moved into a new, state-of-the-art office bathed in natural light,